We are back with another episode of the Kyle Anslone Show, and returning to the show today is Jon Hoffman. He's over at the Cato Institute and writes a bunch of great articles for several outlets. I read them in Time, I read them at the American Conservative. So, Jon, welcome back to the show. How you doing today?
Thanks for having me on, Kyle. I'm doing well.
Well, I'm happy you're here. We certainly have a lot to talk about, a lot developing in the Trump administration. Want to start off with Trump's cartel wars and then touch on the Republicans divided over Israel, get into will the genocide declaration for Gaza change anything? And last, if we got time for it, I'd like your thoughts on Trump thinking about renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. But let's start off here with Venezuela. Of course, we had the big news yesterday that the U.S. military conducted a strike against what they said was a boat of 11 Venezuelans attempting to smuggle drugs from Venezuela, I guess presumably going to the United States. And first up, I want to play this clip of Marco Rubio discussing the U.S.-Venezuela policy.
The days of acting with impunity and having an engine shot down or a couple drugs grabbed off a boat, those days are over. Now we are going to wage combat against drug cartels that are flooding American streets and killing Americans.
Will you take up the legal authority for this strike?
The legal authority?
Yeah.
Well, look, again, I'm not going to answer for the White House counsel. Suffice it to say that all of those steps were taken in advance. The president has designated these as terrorist organizations, which is what they are. When you flood American streets with drugs, you are terrorizing America, and that's going to end.
Will you act on
the United States, the president's top obligation is to secure the national interest and the national security of our people. I know of no president that means that more than this one, our president now, President Trump. And so, but I'm not going to speculate about what might come down the road. Let's get in the air, guys.
So Jon Rubio here is making some pretty bold statements. It sounds like war is coming between the U.S. and Venezuela. How concerned are you, and what do you make of Trump conducting these strikes?
It's just funny how he dodged the what's the legal authorization for these strikes question. But no, this is rather concerning. The United States has been conducting a pretty large military buildup in Latin America. 7 warships, 4,500 soldiers, a nuclear power sub. This strike on the boat carrying cartel members, allegedly, who Trump designated as foreign terrorist organizations. This was an example of an extrajudicial assassination. Drug trafficking is a criminal matter. It's not an act of war. The Trump secret directive that was signed in July instructing the Pentagon to use military force against some Latin American drug cartels that he, again, has labeled as terrorist organizations. This is a dangerous precedent that the president is already reached, but now with the risk of even more military activity in Latin America, this is a slippery slope.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about it. Now, we have Maduro responding, and I want to play this clip from him. He's given some fiery statements in response to the U.S. military buildup and now these strikes.
8 formidable military ships carrying a substantial arsenal of 1,200 missiles, along with a powerful nuclear submarine, are currently targeting the nation of Venezuela. It is an utterly extravagant, completely unjustifiable, and profoundly immoral threat, a truly unacceptable and dangerous proposition. And truly, absolutely criminal, utterly bloody. Absolutely criminal. They have wanted to move forward with what they call maximum pressure, in this case military. And in the face of maximum military pressure, we have declared maximum readiness to defend Venezuela. Mr. President Donald Trump, you need to watch out. Because Marco Rubio wants to stain your hands with blood, with South American, Caribbean, Venezuelan blood. They want to drag you into a bloodbath and have your last name, Trump, be stained with blood for all eternity. With a massacre against the people of Venezuela, with a terrible war against South America and the Caribbean, because this would be a full-scale war across the entire continent. They want to stain Donald Trump's hands with blood.
Le quieren manchar las manos de sangre a Donald Trump.
So, John, I really want to ask you here, because I think Maduro might be onto something, that this is really Marco Rubio kind of leading Donald Trump down this path. He's one of the most notorious Latin America hots in general. Just any government he doesn't like in Latin America, it's like the Cold War, and he's just ready to go conduct a regime change. So do you think this is a Marco Rubio-led effort, or Donald Trump is really committed to this policy himself?
Marco Rubio is certainly playing a large role in this. Like you mentioned, he has long been a hawk on Latin America. But I think there's a lot of other people around Donald Trump who are pretty gung-ho about this policy, along with Marco Rubio. I wanted to read this quick note from Trump's former acting DEA administrator after the strikes. He said, "I've been saying for many years that a law enforcement solution is not good enough to address these global terrorists operating in the Western Hemisphere. And this is no different than if it was Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or Hezbollah moving a boatload of chemical weapons." So obviously, this kind of shows you where they're coming from. And this is a lot of individuals saying this that are surrounding Donald Trump. Notably, nobody here is talking about the demand side of the equation, the fact that the United States is a multi-billion-dollar drug market and that supply will always find a way to meet demand. And nobody's talking about what are the underlying objectives here. One strike on a boat of 11 guys isn't going to end the drug trade. Is this a trial run for more strikes in the region? Is this cover for an expanded operation against the Maduro regime? What is it? Either would bring a host of legal and strategic objections.
So what do you make of this terror designation? They've labeled, I think, 2 Venezuelan, what they claim are cartels, Trans de Aragua, the one TDA that's Americans are probably more familiar with, and then also this Cartel de los Soles, which they say is essentially the Venezuelan government that Maduro is the head of. How is just labeling these groups as terrorists? And I mean, do you think they're terrorists? And then does that give you authorization to just wage blanket war against them?
No, I think this is a carryover. This is a remnant of the failed war on terror. This birth of the imperial presidency, whereby by designating a group, a terrorist organization, somehow it allows the president to buck the authority of Congress to just go around willy-nilly using the military as he wishes. But again, this is not sound policy. This is not legal. This is a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, going back to your previous question about Marco Rubio, I think this is more than just Marco Rubio. I think this is several individuals surrounding the president, perhaps even the president himself. You know, I definitely am not going to try and guess what's in that man's head. But I think there's a lot of individuals surrounding Trump that are singing this tune.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Trump did try to overthrow the Venezuelan government during his first administration. It was a little bit more covert than this, backing Juan Guaido, funding his government, and things like that. But, you know, I think Venezuela is a real formidable country. And, you know, there, I think, is maybe a growing sense in the White House that this would be something similar to the arrest of Noriega in 1989, where they were able to roll into Panama, arrest the leader of the country. This might be a little bit different, but Pete Head seems fairly confident. I want to play this clip from him.
The only person that should be worried is Nicolas Maduro, who's running effectively as a kingpin of a narco state, not actually elected and indicted for $50 million by the United States. And we know he's involved in the types of drug running that has affected the American people directly. What we have there in the Caribbean is a clear demonstration of military might. President Trump has shown, whether it's the southwest border, whether it's the Houthis in freedom of navigation, whether it's Midnight Hammer in Iran, that the precise application of American power can have incredible impacts and reshape dynamics around the world and in the region. So Nicolas Maduro, as he considers whether or not he wants to continue to be a narco trafficker, has some decisions to make. And that's all I'll say about that.
Is regime change our goal there?
Well, that's a presidential decision, and we certainly understand the indictment. We understand the $50 million. Anyone would prefer that he would just give himself up, but that's a presidential level decision, and we're prepared with every asset that the American military has.
He should just surrender, Pete Hegseth says. What an absolute joke. But I do want your thoughts on this idea that this is just a regime change that we could elect to do. I don't hear any discussion about if it's actually feasible for the U.S. military to do it. Maduro has already mobilized 4.5 million members of the militia. This seems like it would be a real fight. So, John, I know you're not necessarily a Venezuela expert, but do you think this would be similar to Panama in 1989 or more similar to, say, the Iraq War in 2003?
Like to think that Trump is smarter than starting a war with Venezuela. I think what he will likely do, you heard Pete Hegseth mention the Houthis in Iran. Both of these operations, it's strange, in my opinion, that he's comparing what he just did to the vessel to Iran and the Houthis. The Houthis spent $7 billion on this fruitless campaign. Trump essentially wiped his hands of it. And then in Iran, he claimed that the U.S. strikes, totally obliterated their nuclear program. So those are actually, to some extent, put on the back burner. But this strike is the first of what we're afraid of, is the first of something much larger to come. So I don't think Trump is about to steamroll towards overthrowing Maduro, but I can certainly see increased military activity against the cartels. He's already been hyping this up, going after cartels in Mexico. So this is a really dangerous, slippery slope that the president has chosen to go down. Just like with Iran, just like with anything else, the president seems to be erratically reaching for different straws, but I don't think there's a coherent strategy backing any of this up.
Yeah, well, a lack of a coherent strategy seems pretty consistent across Trump's foreign policy. Now, John, I do want to talk to you about the Republican divide when it has to deal with Israel. But first, I want to mention we have a brand new sponsor on this show. It is the Expat Money Summit. This online forum is going to run from October 10th to October 12th. But don't wait. Sign up to get your free ticket today to reserve your spot. This year's Expat Money Summit is going to focus on Latin America and the opportunities presented in countries like Argentina and El Salvador. I am going to be appearing on one of the VIP panels. I did one last year. It was an absolutely fantastic discussion. They are very careful about who they pick to speak at the Expat Money Summit. They get people who really understand the issues that they're talking about. And so there's some really, really powerful speakers talking about really important topics. And for those of you interested in foreign policy, since the Expat Money Summit focuses on moving you and your finances abroad, this is, of course, one of the topics that's heavily covered during the summit. So again, don't wait to get your ticket. The summit is going to run from October 10th to October 12th. If you want a 20% discount on your VIP ticket, of course, you could get a regular ticket for free. The VIP ticket, use the promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E, for 20% off. That's going to get you a discount. It's going to let them know you heard about the Expat Money Summit from the Kyle Lanslow Show. Really helps us out when you do it. The website is expatmoneysummit.com. Again, expatmoneysummit.com. Let's get back to the show. So, John, I want to talk to you about the Republican divide when it comes to Israel. Kelly Vallejos, one of the former guests of this show, one of the just really, really astute political commentators that we have right now, wrote a new article at the Quincy Institute going over how there's this summit in Washington, D.C. for conservatives, MAGA conservatives, and there's a sizable faction there, prominent speakers, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Steve Bannon, and of course, the great Kurt Mills from the American Conservative, who engaged in a debate with Matt Abrams on the topic there. And from Kelly's writing, it certainly seems like there is this growing faction of MAGA that maybe you wouldn't call pro-Palestinian in any sense. It's not necessarily about saving Palestine, establishing a Palestinian homeland, but they are really interested in ending the special U.S. relationship between Israel and the U.S. I know you're occasionally in Washington, D.C., so I'm wondering what you think the temperature is right now. Do you see this divide? Is it growing? And just how strong is this faction that I think me and you would both back the Republicans opposed to funding and giving unlimited support to Israel?
The base itself among the people, you're seeing this very serious divide. It's especially generational, but you're seeing this divide between those who, like you just mentioned, your Marjorie Taylor Greens, your Steve Bannons, who are speaking out on this issue, and then those who, like your Ted Cruz, who goes on Tucker Carlson to essentially just uh, cheerlead for Israel. But this divide is serious. If you look at all of the polling, especially the polling that breaks it down by generations, your 18 to like 34, almost 40 age group is really turning against the quote unquote special relationship. Trump himself has acknowledged this. He said the other day, he mentioned, he said Israel's, influence in Congress used to be unparalleled, but said now it's weakening. So even at the highest levels, this is being recognized. Trump has also said, "Hey, uh, Israel is losing my supporters because of what they're doing." A recent Economist poll showed that a plurality of Americans, 43%, believe Israel is committing genocide. So this divide is very much real, first off. Second, it's growing. And third, individuals like Kurt Mills and Bannon and others who are using their platforms to lean into this, which, Kurt is a friend of mine. I think what he's doing is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there, John. Now, when will we see, do you expect we might see some real change, particularly on Capitol Hill? I know Trump says that Israel is losing their iron grip on Congress, but if you do look at Congress, I mean, is Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I think people would point to as being the two most marginal members of the Republican Party, there's a little bit more mainstream Democrats who are willing to criticize Israel. But, like, if a vote came up tomorrow to send $3 billion in bombs to Israel, I think you would have 400 members of the House and 80 members of the Senate all vote for it. That especially on the Democratic side, where half or more are going to vote for it, and you have the base of 80, 70-80% Democrats saying that we think a genocide is going on. And so I guess maybe why hasn't this filtered up and isn't more reflective on Capitol Hill, when it would seem, when you have an issue that's this polarizing, that people are really firmly opposed to what Israel is doing at this point, why don't we have more lawmakers jumping on, trying to kind of lead the banner on this issue and become the speaker for what is clearly a very popular issue among Americans?
First, I completely agree with you. If there was a vote tomorrow, I think it would be, very along the lines of the margins that you mentioned. You're not going to see this divide reflected in policy, I think, for a while, because it's generational in particular. Once the younger generation starts moving into positions of political power, I think things will change. Long term, I think Israel and the lobby have overplayed their hand. In the short term, they're still very influential in Washington, D.C. Many of the members of Congress still rely and are to very large extent afraid of challenging the status quo, and this has been the case for a long time. But long term, I think we will start to see change. Now, in the short term, does that stop what Israel is doing? No, and that very, very hard to swallow.
Oh,
I'm sorry, go on.
no. I lost you for a second, but continue.
Yeah, so long term, I think you'll start to see this change materialize itself. And that's why, and I've been asked this question several times, that many have asked me, do you think Israel is going full throttle at the current moment because they see the writing on the wall that long term the tide is changing? And I always counter with, whether they are going full throttle now because they think the tide is changing and long term they won't be able to do it, or whether they're going full throttle in the short term because they believe they can't be touched. Either way, they're going full throttle. So it brings you to the exact same conclusion in the short term. But long term, I think we will start to see change.
Well, I'm glad you're, optimistic on that. I guess in the long term, I am too. It seems like Netanyahu might get everything he wants before we see any real change on Capitol Hill, which is extremely unfortunate for the Palestinians. One of the things that has surprised me, and I think maybe when Trump talks about Israel losing its iron grip on Congress, is this really doesn't seem to have hurt Massey or Taylor Greene. You could imagine a Democrat could stick up for the Palestinians and get away with it. But in the Republican Party, you are supposed to be pro-Israel, and the anti-Semitic slander is supposed to essentially be a death sentence. And yet, I mean, Massey has stood up before to AIPAC and has gotten reelected. And from what I could tell, Green supporters are still with her. This doesn't seem to be hurting her. And so I guess my question is, can other Republicans get elected without APAT support at this point? Or do you think that we're just going to see like the maybe few people who are already in Congress change their minds like we've seen with Green?
Well, I think this could very well lead to more Republicans being elected that hold these views. I always try to differentiate between uh, MAGA as the base, as the movement itself. And then I can't take credit for this term. My colleague Brandon Buck used it, but what you can consider MAGA Inc., kind of the brand name of MAGA, whereby a lot of politicians on the right have appropriated to just push through status quo policies. But among the actual base, this America First movement, if you will, that's really where this sentiment on reforming the U.S.-Israel relationship is growing, and that's where individuals like Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene are located. So no, I don't see it being politically detrimental for them. If anything, I think it helps them. But I also think we're going to start seeing younger Republicans come onto the scene who are asking a very logical question: just what is the United States getting out of this?
Yeah. Yeah, it would certainly be helpful to ask that question.
Yeah.
So I want to move on next. We had in the past couple of weeks, John, some pretty major uh, studies and things come out. One was by the International Panel of Genocide Scholars, and they put out a statement concluding that there was a genocide taking place in Gaza. The second was the International Food Classification Panel, the IPC, put out a statement concluding that there was a famine in parts of Gaza, and then it, soon to extend to the entirety of the strip. Now, the starvation of the people in Gaza does seem to have started to sway European governments. We've seen the UK, France, Canada, Australia, maybe New Zealand added to the list of countries that are prepared to recognize Palestine as a UN member state in September. So I guess of course, it does seem to be a slow moving process, but at any point can Israel go too far that it would cost them the support of Congress or the Trump administration?
That I don't think anybody really has a concrete answer to that question. Look, the first thing that I want to mention, especially given the reports that came out the past couple of weeks, first the group of genocide scholars, and then the famine report. It's crazy how much the discussion has changed. Earlier on in the war, first it was, oh, you can't highlight the amount of civilians that are being killed because they're Hamas numbers. Then it went to Israel doesn't target civilians and infrastructure like hospitals. Then it went to, oh, release the hostages and the whole world or whole war will end. To now just open discussions of ethnic cleansing and slaughtering Palestinians. It's just not even. It's just blatant, out in the open now. I don't know to what extent any of, whether it be the letter by the genocide scholars or the reports of famine, I don't and I feel bad about this, but I don't think that's going to move the needle so long as Donald Trump in particular cedes the initiative to Netanyahu, lets him essentially set the agenda in the United States with its resources, military prowess, whatever is essentially being pulled along by in tow. It's hard to see this. Um, if anything, I think what you just mentioned about the European states recognizing a Palestinian state. Let's look at the West Bank. The West Bank, the rumors of annexation have been around for a long time, but now uh, uh, Israel has essentially said that they're considering annexing the West Bank in direct retaliation for the European states recognizing a Palestinian state. Just today, Smotrich released a map showing Israeli plans to annex 82% of the West Bank. The other week, Israel approved the controversial E1 corridor settlement, which would effectively cut off the West Bank, first from East Jerusalem, but then divide the territory in two, thereby eliminating the possibility of a continuous Palestinian state. So it seems that as there's more pushback, the more Israel is just going to, it will continue doing what it's doing. The only one that really has a lever here is the United States, but Trump is not willing to use it.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. Just like Joe Biden, it's absolutely baffling to me where Trump has all this leverage, not only over Netanyahu, but also over Zelensky in Ukraine. If he really wants to end these conflicts, he has all the power in the world to force and to put pressure on U.S. allies, and he just won't do it. And not only that, whenever U.S. allies assert some absurd demand like security guarantees, European troops in Ukraine, American air support, Hamas has to release all the hostages at once, and then Israel's going to restart the war anyways. He just won't even force our allies to bat down off their maximalist positions. It's truly baffling and utterly frustrating to watch.
I completely agree. It is incredibly frustrating to watch, especially when Washington holds all the cards. Trump, like any president, has immense leverage here. The United States is subsidizing what Israel is currently doing. It's just a matter of political will. Trump, but Trump, like Biden, has shown himself unwilling or unable to challenge Israel in any meaningful manner. I mean, to me, what really struck home was the Netanyahu's abrogation of the ceasefire that Trump took strong credit for negotiating, the ceasefire that he hyped up heading into office, and Netanyahu essentially scrapped it.
Yeah.
To me, that was the kind of wake up moment that he's not going to do anything, just like Biden didn't do anything.
Yeah. So, John, to wrap up here today, this is a little bit of a tough question. Trump is thinking of, I guess, going back to the original name for the Department of Defense and calling it the Department of War. This has gotten mixed reactions from, like the larger non-interventionist anti-war community. Some say, hey, this is getting rid of the propaganda. This isn't a Department of Defense. It's a Department of Empire. They wage wars around the world. There's no American defense in little smuggling boats off the coast of Venezuela or in Iranian nuclear reactors or in Yemen, but yet we keep attacking. Others say this is going to embolden Trump and make him feel more like, kind of an authoritarian warlord dictator. John, what's your take?
I do think the name change more accurately reflects what the department actually does. On whether it emboldens Trump, I think Trump and anybody who listens to Donald Trump is naturally emboldened. The man lives and dies by his own ego. So I don't think the name change in particular is going to lead Trump to do something that he wouldn't otherwise naturally do. I think on the one hand, I mean, I do agree that renaming it the Department of War just more accurately reflects what it does. But on the other hand, I think Donald Trump has already proven in the 7 or whatever months that he's been president that he is more than willing to use military force under dubious pretexts, and he doesn't need any specific name change to justify it.
Yeah, yeah. It's been really crazy how Trump has gotten away with starting wars with absolutely no discussion of congressional authorization whatsoever. I mean, I'm old enough to remember in 13 when Obama wanted to bomb Syria. Debate went up, and he ultimately ended up sending troops to Syria and bombing Syria. But there was a debate about it, right? Like, even if they're not going to respect the outcome of the debate, at least people talked about it and people cared. There just seems to be absolutely no discuss. I mean, you're in Washington. Is there any discussion that, hey, Trump has violated the Constitution on at least three occasions, the War Powers Act of the Constitution? Clearly, like, no way to dispute it, right? That Iran isn't covered by the 2001 or 2002 AUMF. Certainly, Venezuela isn't. Is there any discussion that you see about this?
Started to see pushback after the strikes on Iran from certain members of Congress who are, kind of raising the alarm. But even those struggled to gain traction because the Iranian issue is so intimately connected to Israel. So while we're seeing, folks like Massey, like we were just talking about, or maybe Rouhana, speak out about against things like this, and we see, think tank nerds such as myself speak out about things like this. We're not seeing this debate seriously happening where it needs to happen, which is in the halls of Congress. And that should be concerning to any American, whether you support Donald Trump, don't support Donald Trump, left, right, up, down. Abrogating the constitutional right of Congress to declare war is something that should frighten all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Jon, thank you so much for returning to the show again today. Absolutely insightful interview. Thank you for sharing your analysis with my audience. And I hope to have you back on the show again in the future.
Thanks for having me on, Kyle.
Thank you.